Hey again everyone, Cami Westall here with a review of Chapter 18 entitled Cultural Struggles of Industrial America. So we just saw in Chapter 17 some of the reasons America is becoming more industrialized and some of the consequences of that. And this starts looking kind of at what, now that it is industrialized, some of the struggles within in terms of culture, different races, different gender, different economic statuses among people, and looking at, it starts out on page 540 with the varieties of culture, these minstrel shows that are just pretty blatantly racist when it talks about the humor there that develops during the 1800s, the idea of blackface comedy, with a lot of these people who would paint themselves in that sense. There were popular songs, but there was a lot of just coarse humor during those, and that's kind of replaced by vaudeville, which is a little more family friendly. When you hear about vaudeville, these are variety acts that appeared throughout the country. A ton of early U.S. TV and film stars got their start in vaudeville shows. You'll have magic acts, you've got song and dance stuff. These are things with these variety shows that common people can afford to go to, and that's big in the cities because you've got so many people living there. So these were a little more respectable and good for entertainment. And they're also, while they have an enduring status in U.S. entertainment history, they're kind of replaced because what we love to go to so much are the movies. So you get those Nickelodeons, more than just a kids' TV station now, but you could kind of watch these through these Nickelodeons or kinetoscopes, these early movies when you would go into stores, and those would be at the front. So these were very popular in the city as well if you could watch a cheap movie for a type of thrill. It gets into sports, talks about World's Fairs, which are interesting, Knoxville, Tennessee, Philadelphia, other places have these, St. Louis, these World's Fairs throughout the years demonstrating new technology, showing off cultures from all over the world. Then into the sports. Talks about boxing or prize fighting becoming a little more standardized. They're not getting paid quite the things, that same amount as that recent Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather fight, but still a popular sport for men to watch there because nothing like watching a man beat up another man. Then baseball really becoming a pastime in American culture, the Cincinnati Red Stockings being the first pro team. It's a cheap sport. All you need is kind of a stick and a ball. They aren't playing with gloves yet. Kids can play them in city lots. Talks about Honus Wagner on page 544. If you look up that baseball card, I think that's still the most valuable baseball card in the world. Just a few of those Honus Wagner cards. But these baseball players will become history. Bicycling becomes big. Football, the first college football game, we don't think of these being two powerhouses, but Rutgers and Princeton, both in New Jersey, playing with a final score of 6-4. It takes them a while to get football rules standardized. It starts out more like rugby. So we got all of this entertainment going on. You've got people living closer together. It makes sense that you want to do things for entertainment when that many people are living in the city, and when they have pretty miserable lives at that, you want cheap entertainment to be available. Then it breaks down on page 545 into this, the Victorian age, named for Queen Victoria, heavy-set woman who was Queen of England for a heck of a long time. And this kind of proper show off your manners, don't give in it to any type of lower temptation, and don't talk about things that are considered rude or controversial. these are especially sexual stuff. All of those are these kind of Victorian restraints. Victorians would be passing out with things that are on TV today. Talks about the relation with sexual boundaries there. If something like Bruce/Caitlyn Jenner had come out, then it just it would have been the end of a lot of Victorians as they try to conceal those things and suppress sexual thoughts and respect those boundaries. Then it gets more back into immigration, which we've already talked in chapter 17. The book talked about immigrants coming in. This looks more at some of the trends with different immigrant groups, some of the criticisms as people look different. It mentions Josiah Strong on 547 and 548 and his concerns. And we're starting to get into a lot of racist stuff because these immigrants coming now around the turn of the 20th century, so around 1900, here in this picture, they look white, but they're pretty much Eastern European or Irish, and that means they are not the Anglo-Saxons. These people from England and Germany and France area, these are people who are primarily Catholic, and that's going to be frowned upon by a lot of Protestant Americans. They speak other languages. They aren't integrated as well. And so a lot of concerns. And then these ethnic Americans that it starts to mention on page 549 keep a lot of their tendencies. They tend to live in their own neighborhoods where they can speak their own languages. It talks more about why it's such an issue for the Catholic Church, because since these are our old Catholic people trying to maintain that old world culture of theirs, meaning that European culture that they didn't want to relinquish. You get talks about the polka music down on the bottom of page 550 and how these groups are maintaining that and changing a little bit ago. The many children that these Catholic immigrant families have and the Eastern Europeans, and that's different. So lots of division, and as people are coming in, as they're poor and as they're different, then we get into these cultural things. You hear about the high culture, kind of like the Victorian stuff a little bit. They're saying, some people are saying, okay, we are a step above. We view classical music and Shakespeare as better, as more noble to follow. They're not into slapstick comedy and the polka music and things like that. So this opinionated idea of what is better, what is more worthy in the arts to be pursued instead of the mass culture. So they don't want the mass culture, and talks about opera and other cities being involved in that as people try to promote themselves as more elitist. And that elitism and all these immigration concerns, that leads to another huge problem, which is social Darwinism. And social Darwinism, so it talks about Charles Darwin on 556. Social Darwinism, does it mention this guy's name? I don't think it does. It kind of starts out with a guy named Herbert Spencer, who writes a book in 1896 called Social Statistics. And Spencer puts forth this very controversial idea that instead of it being the strongest species that survive, it's the strongest races, the strongest people groups. If the rich white Anglo-Saxon Europeans are superior because they've got better technology, then they're going to knock out and defeat the other people who aren't as good, who aren't as advanced. That's going to lead us into World War II. It'll lead into controversial times with Hitler saying the German stock the Aryan race is better than the Jews, than the Poles, and other ethnic groups. It's going to lead to eugenics. Amazingly, South Carolina, I'm impressed, but surprised, South Carolina doesn't forcibly sterilize as many people, but eugenics being this idea, kind of a science based on genes, or the study of your genes, and that some people are gifted with better genes. North Carolina forcibly sterilizes thousands of people because they think these people aren't worthy to procreate. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, that's not just founding abortion because women have the right to choose. She is a eugenicist, social Darwinist, who says, no, these women shouldn't be reproducing because they're not quality individuals. Therefore, they should have an abortion. So very controversial stuff that devalues a lot of people and helps explain why countries are going to be taking over other countries at this time, the United States included, leading to a lot of racism all over the world. And then in a little more uplifting stuff with the arts, this idea of realism, Mark Twain, Walt Whitman, Louisa May Alcott wrote, I didn't mention the title of her Little Women book. And then the visual arts, this is one of the paintings done by Winslow Homer. Talks about his, being in this time of racism, depicting African Americans in different scenes, depicting factory workers and Civil War soldiers. So these exposures of people as art, but also as trying to show an appreciation for people before we get into photography. And now you're actually capturing history and on film. Back in the day when you used to have something called film that you had to get developed then. So there is our rundown of and a very brief overview of these cultural struggles in the United States during that time.